Well, I think that the UFC news that has been crazily coming through the system is finally taking a slow down time. It's a slow period for the UFC. Following UFC 229, the UFC, I think, clearly thought that it was the best time to release a bunch of new fights, and UFC 229 had a pretty big outcome in the main event of UFC 230. Derek Lewis, after beating Alexander Volkov, he kind of turned into an overnight star of the UFC, maybe even the biggest star of the UFC to the casual fans, by his post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, to his post-fight actions, to the way that he beat Alexander Volkov, like that come from behind knockout. He was being dominated the entire fight, and then right at the end, actually at the end of the first round, you could say Lewis was really in a strength position, probably could have won the fight there if he put a lot of power and energy into that last 10 seconds. But by the third round, Derek Lewis said, you know what, I'm losing this fight, I'm going to lose this fight, might as well put all the energy I have left into knocking this dude out, and he did it in a spectacular fashion. So what does this lead to, you might ask? The UFC announcing Daniel Cormier is going to take on Derek Lewis for the heavyweight title at Madison Square Garden in New York for UFC 230. Cormier versus Lewis. And then immediately following that, we have Poirier and Diaz falling through. Now, the UFC obviously didn't want this to happen, but the fight between Diaz and Poirier fell through due to Poirier suffering an injury. I don't know if the injury's been disclosed yet, but to my knowledge, it hasn't. So that card was pulled, and they also took the flyweight champion, Valentina Shevchenko, well, not the championship off the line at that event, and they're moving it back to UFC 231, Holloway Ortega, which was big news for anybody out of Toronto who has tickets to that event. It just makes that event even more better because we're still going to see Valentina the Bullet Shevchenko versus Joanna Jędrzejczyk, and that's a great fight. But why did this brings up a question I think everybody's asking, and it's why would Cormier take a fight with Lewis? Now, Cormier's come out and said that he wouldn't have taken the fight if it was Stipe. Obviously not. He has a very, very high chance of losing to Stipe Miocic, and that chance is probably cut in half by taking on Derek Lewis, who doesn't seem to have any wrestling acumen whatsoever. He's more of a knockout artist that if he's taken down, he probably will die by the third round, energy-wise. Maybe he puts out bursts, but he's not really a consistent cardio guy, and Cormier is that guy. Cormier is that guy in the heavyweight division. He's the wrestler. There's not that many wrestlers in the heavyweight division outside of Cormier. Stipe Miocic, I would say, is a good wrestler, and Curtis Blades. We don't see many wrestlers in that division. Verdum is the jiu-jitsu guy, and then the rest tend to be strikers, very, very heavy-hitting strikers, and that's why Cormier, Stipe, they thrive, even though Stipe Miocic was KO in a lot of them. It's why those type of fighters thrive, is because if they take you down, they're not letting you up. Look at the way Stipe beat Francis Ngannou, and then they had a wrestler versus a wrestler, and who knew the guy that could knock out the other one, which was Daniel Cormier. So why would Cormier do this with the Brock Lesnar fight on the horizon? The only answer I would have for that is it's going to build a lot of hype to that fight. A lot of fight people, a lot of casual fans are going to want to watch this fight. The way Derek Lewis grew overnight on Instagram, he gained 500,000 followers in one night. So obviously he's a big name, and it's just going to build into Cormier versus Brock Lesnar, which we're expecting next year. And then if that falls through, we're going to get to see Jones and Cormier no matter what. And it's just building that star for Cormier. And I think that the risk-reward level here is probably about even for risk-reward. I think it gives enough rewards, but there's still a risk with Derek Lewis. Derek Lewis has never been finished, never lost by decision in his UFC career. He's only ever been knocked out or TKO'd. He's never been finished on the ground. He's never lost a decision, which is kind of crazy to think because he does die out, but he knows in those last seconds he needs to put it all on the line, and he usually does this to a very, very effective manner if it ever does get to the last round of the fight. I don't think the championship rounds will benefit Derek Lewis in looking for a decision, but I think Cormier has a way better chance. I wouldn't put my money on this fight. I'm picking Cormier for sure, but if I would put my money, it'd be on Cormier, but I wouldn't put my money on this fight for Lewis. So that clearly tells you something about this matchup for Cormier being in the advantage position as a fighter. And it's really, really early. It's immediate. It's crazy that Cormier would. It's going to be fun to see how Cormier stays in shape throughout the year because he's accepting this fight on a month notice. So who wins? Who doesn't? It's going to shake the UFC if Derek Lewis wins. The UFC shook because then you have Derek Lewis as a heavyweight champion. Who would have thought that? Who would have thought Derek Lewis would be a heavyweight champion by the end of the year? And if he lands a punch, one single punch clean punch on Cormier's face. I think Cormier's going to sleep. But even Cormier says that he's better with boxers. And Lewis is not a big kicker, even though he has done some crazy jumping kicks. But he's a priority boxer. He's a priority boxer. He boxes way more than he does anything else. And I think that plays right into Daniel Cormier's strengths. I'm taking Cormier in that fight. Will I do a fight breakdown nearer to the fight? Probably, because it's probably going to be one of the only good fights on that. No, actually, 230 is a good card. They got Weidman, Rockhold. That's a good fight. It's a pretty underrated card. Adesanya, Brunson. That's going to be good in press conferences. They don't like each other. That should be a fun card, and I think I'm going to do a prediction video for all the fights there. But for the main event, I don't think my opinion is going to change here. I'm going to take Cormier from now until the fight, and it's just going to be a fun card. Now, we don't really have to worry about that until November 3rd. We also have a Fight Night Volkan versus Smith coming up. But moving on from Cormier and Lewis, because there was more news in the MMA world, we also ended up getting Jones versus Gustafsson confirmed for the end of the year card, December 29th at T-Mobile Arena once again. Big fight. Jones-Gustafsson, the first fight, I remember watching that fight, was a dog fight, and a lot of people that were watching it with me thought Gustafsson won. So it just goes to show that it's a tough matchup for Jones. Jones on steroids? I don't know. Jones juiced up. He dominated Cormier. He got caught for steroids, and he smashed Cormier. When he didn't get caught for anything, he beat Cormier in a decision. So this Jones might be the scariest guy you'll ever see in your life. But nonetheless, we have that fight on December 29th alongside the Brazilian matchup, Nunes versus Cyborg, which I think might fall out. I think Nunes might pull out nearer to the December 29th card, but we will see. What else did we also got? Kevin Lee versus Al Iaquinta, which is a rematch. Kevin Lee actually lost Iaquinta, even though their ranking position wouldn't tend to tell you that. Kevin Lee is ranked higher than Iaquinta, but Iaquinta beat him in the last fight, and that should be a good fight. And a lot of people are high on Al Iaquinta from his fight with Khabib, where he defended a lot of takedowns, still got 5-0'd, smashed every round. But he did a damn good job in that fight, and he's really been putting his name out there as one of the top guys of the division, and we're going to see that against Kevin Lee, who I think is one of the best fighters in that division, and who has a good chance, who would have a good chance of dethroning Khabib if they ever were to fight. But the way Khabib is talking, it doesn't look like Khabib is going to fight further than Tony Ferguson, which will be most likely his next matchup if he's not going to accept a fight with McGregor. But yeah, that's the news after UFC 229. A lot of things transpired in the UFC world. I'm a little bit late to the party, but I thought I might as well drop a video while I'm here. We're probably going to start an every other day uploading streak, because these videos where I just talk to you guys about UFC and other things, they're not the hardest things to make, so I'm just going to enjoy my life doing them. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're watching in the day, you have a great day. If you're watching at night, have a great night. And to all you guys, peace out. I should fuck her in a Benz.